Before we dive into tonight's story, take a moment to comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether you're tuning in from New York, Los Angeles, a small town in Texas, or anywhere in between, we love hearing from you. And don't forget, at the end of this journey, rate the story from 0 to 10. Now, let's begin. Jennifer Morrison stood in front of her bathroom mirror, hands trembling as she fastened the clasp of a delicate silver necklace, the only piece of real jewelry she owned. It had been her grandmother's, passed down with whispered stories of resilience and survival, stories Jennifer now understood with painful clarity. The black dress hanging on the back of her bedroom door seemed to mock her from across the small apartment. She'd found it at a consignment shop in Brooklyn, marked down twice because of a nearly invisible stain near the hem. With careful stitching and strategic positioning, she'd made it presentable, almost elegant. Almost. Tonight was the annual Riverside Children's Hospital Gala, Manhattan's most prestigious charity event, where tickets cost more than her monthly rent. She wasn't attending by choice or wealth. 3 weeks ago, her 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, had been selected as one of 5 children to speak about the hospital's life-saving cardiac program. Sophie, born with a congenital heart defect, had undergone 3 surgeries before her 5th birthday. The hospital had waived most costs, but the remaining medical debt still haunted Jennifer's credit score and monthly budget. "Mommy, do I look pretty?" Sophie appeared in the doorway, twirling in her special dress, a soft blue creation that Jennifer's coworker had generously donated after her own daughter outgrew it. Sophie's dark curls bounced around her shoulders, and her brown eyes sparkled with excitement untouched by the awareness of how they were different from the other families attending tonight. "You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart." Jennifer knelt down, careful not to wrinkle her dress, and tucked a curl behind Sophie's ear. "Remember, when it's your turn to speak tonight, just look at me. Pretend we're in our living room practicing, okay?" Sophie nodded solemnly, then grinned. "And then there's the fancy dinner with the little forks, right? Mrs. Peterson said rich people have different forks for everything." Jennifer suppressed a sigh. Mrs. Peterson, their elderly neighbor who'd agreed to help with last-minute preparations, had been filling Sophie's head with stories about high society, most gleaned from period dramas and outdated magazines. "Just follow what other people do, and you'll be fine," Jennifer said, though her own stomach churned with anxiety about navigating the same foreign territory. The taxi ride to the Grand Riverside Hotel cost $45, a minor fortune that Jennifer had budgeted for by skipping lunches for 2 weeks. As they pulled up to the entrance, valets in crisp uniforms opened doors for guests emerging from town cars and limousines. Jennifer gripped Sophie's hand tighter as they walked through the gilded doors into a world that felt like another planet. The ballroom was a cathedral of crystal and light. Chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from soaring ceilings, casting rainbow prisms across marble floors so polished they reflected the hundreds of guests like a still lake. Women dripped with diamonds and designer labels, their laughter a melodic chorus of confidence and belonging. Men in custom tuxedos discussed business deals and vacation homes with the casual ease of people who'd never worried about choosing between medication and groceries. Jennifer felt every eye on her discount dress, her department store shoes, her absolute otherness. "Name, please?" A woman with a clipboard and an expression of professional courtesy stood at the registration table. "Jennifer Morrison and Sophie Morrison. We're here for the children's program." The woman scanned her list, her perfectly manicured nail trailing down the page. "Ah, yes. You're at table 28. She handed Jennifer 2 name tags with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The children speaking tonight will gather in the side room at 7:15. Someone will come collect them." Table 28, Jennifer soon discovered, was positioned in what could only be described as social Siberia, tucked behind a decorative pillar near the kitchen doors. The other seats at her table remained conspicuously empty, though the event was clearly sold out. The message was clear. Charity cases belonged at the margins. "This table is wobbly," Sophie observed, pressing her hand against the surface and watching it tilt slightly. Should we tell someone? It's fine, honey. Let's just sit quietly and enjoy the evening. Jennifer pulled out a chair, hyper-aware of the curious and pitying glances from nearby tables. To her left, a group of women in couture gowns whispered behind champagne flutes, their eyes flickering toward Jennifer with the kind of assessment that strips away dignity. She caught fragments of their conversation, subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, cruel enough to land with precision. Can you imagine coming to an event like this in something off the rack? The charity should provide appropriate attire if they're going to parade these people around. I heard the children speaking tonight are all from the, program. The ones who can't afford treatment. So tragic, really. Well, it does make for compelling fundraising. Nothing opens checkbooks like a sick child and a struggling mother. Jennifer's face burned, but she kept her expression neutral, focusing on Sophie, who was blissfully distracted by the elaborate ice sculpture of a swan at the center of the room. She'd perfected this skill over the years, the ability to absorb cruelty without showing the wound. Single mothers learned to develop thick skin, or they drowned in the constant judgment. A waiter appeared with champagne, his tray bypassing their table entirely before Jennifer could even make eye contact. Another waiter followed with hors d'oeuvres, delicate pastries and caviar arrangements that also mysteriously never reached table 28. The message was clear. They were present for optics, not hospitality. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Sophie whispered, eyeing the trays of food circulating everywhere except their corner. "Dinner will be served soon, sweetheart. Just a little longer." Jennifer pulled a granola bar from her small clutch, contraband she'd packed precisely for this possibility. As Sophie quietly nibbled, trying to be discreet, Jennifer surveyed the room, searching for familiar faces and finding none. Then the energy in the ballroom shifted, conversations dimming as attention focused on the main entrance. A man had arrived, and his presence commanded the space with effortless authority. He was tall, easily 6'3", with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and features that suggested both strength and intelligence. His tuxedo was impeccably tailored, but what struck Jennifer most was his bearing, confident without arrogance, powerful without pretension. "That's Alexander Hawthorne," breathed a woman at the next table, loud enough for Jennifer to overhear. "He's hosting tonight. Youngest self-made billionaire in New York. Built Hawthorne Technologies from nothing, and now he's worth, God, probably 15 billion? Maybe more. Completely private, though. Never does interviews. Barely any photos. This gala is his only public appearance all year." Jennifer watched as Alexander Hawthorne moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. But she noticed something others seemed to miss. His smiles never quite reached his eyes, and there was a tension in his shoulders, a weariness that suggested the weight of performance. He was playing a role, just as she was, though his costume was far more expensive. Their eyes met across the ballroom for one brief moment. Jennifer, caught staring, looked away quickly, but not before she registered surprise in his expression, a flicker of recognition that made no sense. They'd never met. She'd never moved in circles that would intersect with a billionaire philanthropist, yet something in that momentary connection felt significant, like the first note of a song she couldn't yet identify. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please find your seats. We'll begin this evening's program." The announcement came from a woman at the podium, her voice amplified through discreet speakers. The ballroom filled with the rustle of expensive fabric and the scraping of chairs as hundreds of guests settled in for the formalities. Jennifer held Sophie's hand under the table, offering silent reassurance as the lights dimmed, and a presentation began on the massive screens flanking the stage. Images of the hospital, smiling children in various stages of treatment, doctors and nurses captured in moments of compassion and expertise. Then came the statistics. The number of children served, the percentage who couldn't afford care, the gap between need and resources. It was manipulative and effective. Jennifer could see checkbooks metaphorically opening around the room, and now, the woman at the podium continued, "We'd like to introduce you to 5 extraordinary children whose lives have been forever changed by the Riverside Children's Hospital Cardiac Program. Their courage and resilience inspire us all. Sophie was the third child called. Jennifer watched her daughter walk to the stage with careful steps, her small figure dwarfed by the grand space, and felt her heart clench with pride and protectiveness. Sophie had practiced her speech dozens of times, memorizing every word with the seriousness of a child who understood, even at 7, that this moment mattered. My name is Sophie Morrison, and I'm 7 years old. When I was born, the doctors told my mommy that my heart wasn't working right. They said I needed surgery, but it cost a lot of money. My mommy worked 3 jobs to help pay for it, but it still wasn't enough. Then Riverside Hospital said they would help us anyway. They fixed my heart 3 times, and now I can run and play like other kids. I'm so grateful to the doctors and nurses, and to my mommy, who never gave up on me. Thank you for helping kids like me. Sophie's voice wavered slightly at the end, her eyes finding Jennifer's in the darkness, drawing strength from that connection. The applause that followed was thunderous, genuine emotion cutting through the usual polite response. Jennifer felt tears streaming down her face, unashamed now of anyone's judgment. But as Sophie returned to her seat, flushed with accomplishment, Jennifer caught the whispers starting at nearby tables. The same women who'd mocked her dress earlier now had fresh material. 3 jobs and still couldn't afford treatment? What kind of jobs could she possibly have? Did you see the mother's dress? It's literally coming apart at the seam. If you're going to accept charity, the least you could do is present yourself appropriately. I don't understand people who have children they clearly can't afford. It's irresponsible, really. Each word was a small blade. Death by 1,000 cuts. Jennifer wrapped her arm around Sophie, who was mercifully unaware of the cruelty surrounding them, and tried to focus on the next child's speech. But the damage was done. She felt exposed, humiliated, reduced to a cautionary tale for the wealthy to discuss over wine. Then, Alexander Hawthorne took the stage. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight, and for your continued support of Riverside Children's Hospital. Your generosity saves lives. It's that simple, and that profound. His voice was rich and commanding, but also unexpectedly warm. Before we move to dinner, I'd like to share something personal. Something I've never publicly discussed before. 25 years ago, I was a patient at Riverside Hospital. I was 14, and I'd been in a serious accident. My family couldn't afford the extensive reconstructive surgeries and rehabilitation I needed. We were weeks away from losing our home, drowning in medical debt. Riverside took me in anyway. They treated me not as a charity case, but as a person deserving of care and dignity. The doctors and social workers there didn't just save my body, they saved my future. A murmur of surprise rippled through the ballroom. This wasn't the scripted speech people had expected. Alexander Hawthorne, untouchable billionaire, was revealing vulnerability. I built my company with one guiding principle, that access to help shouldn't depend on the size of your bank account. We all deserve chances, second chances, third chances. Tonight, I look around this room and I see enormous privilege, including my own, but I also see what privilege should mean. Responsibility. Compassion, the understanding that we are all one accident, one illness, one piece of bad luck away from needing help. His gaze swept the ballroom, and Jennifer felt it land on her for a second time, lingering now with intention. I've heard whispers tonight, seen the way some of you look at the families whose children spoke, the judgment. The subtle cruelty disguised as concern. Let me be absolutely clear. Those families have more courage than most people in this room will ever need. Showing up here, vulnerable and exposed, to tell their stories for the benefit of others, that's real strength. The ballroom had gone utterly silent, tension crackling through the air like electricity. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, others sat frozen, uncertain whether they were being praised or admonished. Now, before we proceed with dinner, I'd like to do something unconventional. There's a woman here tonight, a single mother who worked 3 jobs to save her daughter's life. A woman who, despite facing judgment and dismissal, raised an extraordinary child who spoke with more grace and courage than I had at her age. A woman who represents everything this gala should celebrate. Alexander's eyes fixed directly on Jennifer, and suddenly the spotlight, literal and metaphorical, swung to table 28. Jennifer Morrison, would you please join me on stage? The ballroom erupted in confused murmurs. Jennifer sat frozen, certain she'd misheard. Sophie tugged at her hand excitedly. Mommy, he said your name. You have to go up there. But Jennifer couldn't move. Paralyzed by shock and the weight of hundreds of eyes now turned toward her with curiosity, confusion, and in some cases barely concealed hostility. Alexander's voice came again, gentler now but no less commanding. Jennifer, please, I'd very much like to meet you properly. Somehow Jennifer's legs carried her forward. The walk to the stage felt endless, each step echoing in the cavernous silence. She was acutely aware of every imperfection, the slight wobble in her discount heels, the way her dress pulled slightly at the waist where she'd taken it in herself, the absence of the designer labels and jewelry that adorned every other woman in the room. When she reached the stage, Alexander extended his hand to help her up the steps. His grip was firm, steadying, and up close she could see warmth in his eyes, something genuine beneath the public persona. Thank you for your courage, he said quietly, for her ears only. Then, turning back to the audience, he continued, I've asked Jennifer to join me because I want to announce the creation of a new initiative, the Riverside Future Fund. This endowment will provide not just medical care, but comprehensive support for families facing healthcare crises, education assistance, job training, housing stability, mental health services, everything needed to not just survive, but thrive. Applause began, tentative at first, then building to genuine enthusiasm as people recognized a significant philanthropic announcement, and Jennifer, you and Sophie will be the first family enrolled in this program. Riverside will continue supporting Sophie's medical care through her 18th birthday, and will provide resources to help stabilize your family's financial situation. You've carried this burden alone for too long. Jennifer's knees nearly buckled. She felt tears streaming down her face, unable to process the magnitude of what was happening. 7 years of crushing weight, of constant calculation and sacrifice, of choosing between dignity and survival, suddenly lifting. I don't understand, she managed to whisper. Why me? Why now? Alexander's smile was sad and knowing. Because I see myself in you. The person I was before someone gave me a chance. And because no one should have to choose between saving their child and saving themselves. As they left the stage together, Jennifer caught the expressions around the room. Shock. Envy. Resentment. But also, in some faces, something like shame. The women who'd mocked her dress earlier couldn't meet her eyes now. The people who'd whispered about irresponsibility now faced the reality that their cruelty had been witnessed and, in a way, called out by the most powerful person in the room. The dinner that followed existed in a strange, surreal haze for Jennifer. She'd been escorted back to table 28, where Sophie bounced with irrepressible excitement. But the table was no longer isolated. People approached throughout the meal, wealthy donors and hospital board members introducing themselves with newfound warmth, as if her proximity to Alexander Hawthorne's favor had fundamentally altered her molecular structure. Some seemed genuine in their congratulations. Others wore their opportunism openly, angling for connection to the billionaire through her. Jennifer navigated it all with the same survival instincts that had carried her through 7 years of single motherhood, smiling when appropriate, deflecting intrusive questions, protecting Sophie from the overwhelming attention. But her mind kept circling back to Alexander Hawthorne. Why had he singled her out so publicly? His story about being a patient at Riverside added context, but it didn't fully explain the intensity of his focus on her specifically. There were 4 other families with children in the cardiac program. What made her situation different? Across the ballroom, she occasionally caught glimpses of him moving between tables, fulfilling his hosting duties, but several times their eyes met, and each time she felt that same inexplicable pull, like gravity announcing itself. "Mommy, can I have more of the chocolate cake?" Sophie's voice pulled Jennifer back to the present. Her daughter had discovered the dessert course and was surveying the 3-layer creation with strategic interest. "One more piece. Then we need to think about heading home." It's getting late. In truth, Jennifer was desperate to leave, to escape the overwhelming spectacle and process what had happened in the privacy of her small apartment. But as if sensing her intention, a woman in an elegant navy suit appeared at their table, her manner brisk, but not unkind. "Miss Morrison? I'm Caroline Chen, Director of the Riverside Future Fund. Mr. Hawthorne asked me to speak with you before you leave tonight. Would you have a few minutes?" Jennifer glanced at Sophie, who was fully absorbed in her cake. "Of course." Caroline sat down, producing a leather portfolio. "First, let me say congratulations. What Mr. Hawthorne announced tonight represents a significant commitment, one he doesn't make lightly. The Future Fund will provide comprehensive support, as he mentioned, but we'll need to meet early next week to discuss details and complete necessary paperwork. Would Monday morning work for you?" "I work Monday mornings," Jennifer said automatically, then realized how ridiculous that sounded given what had just been offered. "I mean, I can probably arrange something. What do you do for work?" Caroline's pen was poised above her notepad. "I'm a junior paralegal at a small firm in Brooklyn. I also work evenings doing data entry remotely, and weekends I clean houses." The words felt both shameful and defiant, an admission of circumstances beyond her control and a declaration of her refusal to be defeated by them. Caroline's expression softened with something like respect. "Monday afternoon, then. Let's say 2 o'clock at the Riverside administrative offices. We'll discuss transitioning you out of those additional jobs and into more sustainable employment. Mr. Hawthorne mentioned you'd put your own education on hold?" Jennifer blinked, thrown by the personal knowledge. "I was in college when I got pregnant with Sophie. I took a leave of absence and never went back. I was studying social work." "Well, the Future Fund includes educational opportunities. We can discuss that on Monday as well." Caroline handed her a business card. "Please don't hesitate to call if you have questions before then." "And Miss Morrison? This is real. I know it probably feels surreal right now, but Mr. Hawthorne doesn't make empty promises." After Caroline departed, Jennifer sat in stunned silence, the business card heavy in her hand despite its negligible weight. Around her, the gala continued its choreographed dance of wealth and charity, but she felt separate from it now, suspended between her old reality and something new she couldn't yet comprehend. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" The voice was familiar now. Jennifer looked up to find Alexander Hawthorne standing beside table 28, gesturing to one of the empty chairs. Up close, away from the stage lights and commanding presence, he looked almost normal, though the exceptional tailoring and unmistakable aura of power remained. "Mr. Hawthorne, I don't know what to say. Thank you seems completely inadequate. Alexander, please. And you don't need to say anything. I meant what I said on stage." He settled into the chair with easy grace, seemingly unconcerned about abandoning his hosting duties to sit at the least prestigious table in the ballroom. Sophie, chocolate smeared at the corner of her mouth, leaned forward with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "Are you really a billionaire?" That's what the ladies were saying. "Sophie." Jennifer's face flushed with embarrassment, but Alexander laughed, genuine amusement lighting his features. "I am. though I try not to think about it in exactly those terms. Money is just a tool, like a hammer or a paintbrush. What matters is what you build with it. My mommy builds our life with her tools, Sophie announced proudly. She uses coupons and yard sales and something called credit card rewards. She's really good at it. Alexander's expression grew serious, his eyes meeting Jennifer's with understanding. I'm sure she is. Your mother is clearly exceptional at many things. The compliment, delivered without flattery or ulterior motive, settled into Jennifer's chest like warmth. I need to ask, she said quietly, conscious of Sophie listening, but unable to contain the question. Why me? I'm grateful, more than I can express, but I don't understand. There are hundreds of families in situations like mine. Why single me out so publicly? Alexander was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table as he seemed to weigh his response. Honestly? Because I was sitting up at the head table surrounded by people congratulating themselves on their generosity, and I happened to see you sitting here alone. I saw the way people looked at you and your daughter, the judgment, the casual cruelty, and I saw the way you held your head up despite it, the way you focused entirely on Sophie, making sure she felt special and loved, even as people whispered. It reminded me of my mother. His voice caught slightly on the last word, a crack in the polished facade. She worked 4 jobs after my accident, trying to keep us afloat. People said terrible things about her too, about her choices, about whether she deserved help. I watched her absorb that cruelty every day, and I swore that if I ever had the power to change that dynamic, I would. Jennifer felt tears threatening again. Your mother must be very proud of what you've built. She passed away 3 years ago, Alexander said quietly. Heart failure, probably brought on by decades of stress and overwork. She lived long enough to see Hawthorne Technologies succeed, but not long enough to truly rest. That's my greatest regret. The vulnerability in his admission was startling. This wasn't the public Alexander Hawthorne, polished and untouchable. This was a man still carrying grief and guilt, trying to make sense of loss through action. I'm so sorry, Jennifer said. And meant it. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the noise of the gala fading to background hum. Sophie, sensing the shift in emotional tone, climbed into Jennifer's lap, her small body heavy with approaching sleep. I should get her home, Jennifer said. It's past her bedtime, and tomorrow is a school day. Of course. I'll have my driver take you. Alexander stood, then paused. Jennifer, I know this is all happening very quickly, and I'm sure you have questions and concerns. The future fund is legitimate, fully structured, with oversight and transparency. Caroline will walk you through everything. But I also want you to know this isn't a transaction with strings attached. You don't owe me anything. Gratitude, loyalty, nothing. This is simply what should happen when someone has resources and someone else needs support. The explicit reassurance, addressing concerns she hadn't yet voiced, settled something in Jennifer's chest. Thank you. And Alexander? For what it's worth, I think your mother would be incredibly proud, not just of your success, but of your heart. His smile was brief but genuine, transforming his features from commanding to almost boyish. I hope so. Good night, Jennifer. I'll see you around. As a sleek black car delivered them back to Brooklyn, Sophie dozing against her shoulder, Jennifer stared out at the city lights and tried to process the evening. In the span of a few hours, her entire trajectory had shifted. The crushing weight of medical debt, the exhausting juggle of multiple jobs, the constant fear of one unexpected expense derailing everything, all of it suddenly negotiable, potentially even temporary. But underneath the gratitude and relief was something more complicated, a nagging sense that she'd been pulled into a story not entirely of her own making, that Alexander Hawthorne's generosity, however genuine, came with invisible complexities she couldn't yet see. And there was the way he'd looked at her, not with pity or even simple compassion, but with something that felt like recognition, as if he saw past the single mother struggling to survive to someone she'd forgotten existed. Back in their small apartment, Sophie tucked safely in bed, Jennifer stood at her kitchen window looking out at the modest Brooklyn neighborhood that had been her entire world for 7 years. Tomorrow, she'd return to her paralegal job, to the familiar routine of survival. But Monday, everything would change. As she finally crawled into bed, exhausted beyond measure, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hope you got home safely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make a difference tonight. Your courage inspired more people than you know. Sleep well, Alexander." Jennifer stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard, uncertain how to respond to a billionaire texting her at midnight with what felt like genuine warmth. Finally, she typed, "We got home safe. Thank you for everything. Still processing, but deeply grateful." His response came almost immediately. "Take all the time you need. This isn't a fairy tale with a clock striking midnight. It's real. And it's lasting. Good night, Jennifer." As she set down her phone, Jennifer realized that Alexander Hawthorne had fundamentally misunderstood one thing. This might not be a fairy tale by his definition, but it felt like magic to her. Terrifying, overwhelming, potentially life-altering magic that she wasn't sure she knew how to handle. What she didn't know yet was that magic, even the well-intentioned kind, always comes with complications. And the story that had begun tonight at the gala was only the opening chapter of something far more complex than either of them anticipated. Monday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Jennifer had spent the weekend oscillating between euphoria and anxiety, researching the Riverside Future Fund, finding sparse information beyond the announcement at the gala, and second, guessing every aspect of what had happened. Sophie, mercifully, remained delightfully convinced that they'd stumbled into a real-life fairy tale, complete with a prince in the form of Alexander Hawthorne, a narrative Jennifer neither confirmed nor explicitly discouraged. At 1:45 p.m., Jennifer stood outside the Riverside Children's Hospital administrative building, her hands clammy despite the mild October weather. She'd dressed carefully in her one professional suit, purchased years ago for job interviews, and worn so rarely that it still looked almost new. Caroline Chen met her in the lobby with a warm smile and firm handshake. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Let's head up to my office." The elevator ride to the 6th floor was mercifully brief, and soon Jennifer was seated in a bright, modern office overlooking the East River. Caroline arranged several folders on her desk with practiced efficiency. "Before we begin, I want to address what you're probably thinking. This feels too good to be true, and in your experience, things that feel that way usually are." "Am I close?" Jennifer exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Extremely close. Fair enough. Let me walk you through exactly what the Riverside Future Fund entails, the structure, oversight, and your rights as a recipient." For the next hour, Caroline methodically explained the program. It was, as Alexander had promised, comprehensive. Sophie's medical care would be fully covered through age 18, including any future surgeries, medications, and therapy. Jennifer would receive a monthly stipend designed to replace the income from her second and third jobs, allowing her to focus on single employment and parenting. Additionally, the fund would provide access to career counseling, educational opportunities, and mental health support. This is all overseen by a board independent of Mr. Hawthorne's personal finances, Caroline explained. While he's the primary donor, the fund operates with full transparency and accountability. You'll receive quarterly reports, and you'll have access to advocates if you have concerns or need support navigating any aspect of the program. What does Mr. Hawthorne get out of this? The question emerged before Jennifer could censor it. Caroline didn't seem offended. "That's a smart question, and I respect you for asking it directly. Honestly, he gets the satisfaction of making a difference. I know that sounds naive, especially in a city where everyone has an angle, but I've worked with Alexander Hawthorne for 5 years now, and I've never seen him operate with ulterior motives. He's private, intensely so, and he genuinely believes wealth comes with responsibility. She leaned forward slightly. That said, I want to be clear about something. You have agency in this arrangement. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, if boundaries are crossed, if anything about this situation feels coercive or inappropriate, you can walk away. The support for Sophie's medical care is ironclad, regardless. Your participation in the broader program is entirely voluntary. The explicit acknowledgement of power dynamics, the clear establishment of boundaries, helped ease some of Jennifer's anxiety. Thank you for saying that. They spent another hour reviewing paperwork, financial details, and scheduling follow-up appointments. By the time Jennifer left Caroline's office, she had a folder full of documents, a check representing her first monthly stipend, and a feeling of cautious optimism that maybe, just maybe, this was legitimate. As she walked through the hospital lobby toward the exit, her phone buzzed. Alexander's name appeared on the screen, accompanied by a message. Caroline told me you just left your meeting. I hope it went well and you feel comfortable with everything. I'm actually at the hospital today, visiting some patients. Any chance you have time for coffee? Jennifer stopped walking, causing a minor pedestrian pileup behind her. She stepped aside, staring at the message. Coffee with Alexander Hawthorne. Her first instinct was to politely decline, to maintain appropriate distance from the man who just dramatically altered her life trajectory. But a stronger impulse, curiosity, maybe something more, prompted her fingers to move. I have about 45 minutes before I need to pick up Sophie from school. There's a coffee shop on the corner. His response was immediate. Perfect. I'll meet you there in 5 minutes. The coffee shop was a small, unpretentious place, the kind of neighborhood establishment that served hospital staff and local residents without pretension. Jennifer ordered a simple latte and claimed a corner table, trying to calm her racing heart. When Alexander entered, he was dressed more casually than at the gala, dark jeans and a navy sweater, but he still radiated that unmistakable presence. Several people glanced up, double-taking as they recognized him. But he moved through the space with practiced ease, ordering at the counter before joining her. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. I wanted to check in personally, make sure you feel okay about everything. Caroline was wonderful. Very thorough, very clear. It's a lot to process, but I'm grateful. Jennifer wrapped her hands around her warm mug, grounding herself in the familiar sensation. Alexander nodded, sipping his black coffee. Good. That's important to me. That you feel agency in this situation, not like something is being done to you. Can I ask you something? Jennifer met his eyes directly. You said at the gala that you saw yourself in me, that it reminded you of your mother. But there must be dozens, hundreds of families in similar situations. What really made you single me out? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, as if looking at something beyond the coffee shop walls. Honestly? I'm not entirely sure I can articulate it. There was something about the way you held yourself, the way you focused entirely on Sophie despite everything else. But also there was this moment during her speech when she looked at you, and your whole face transformed. It wasn't pride, or at least not just pride. It was this fierce, protective love that I recognized from my own childhood. My mother used to look at me exactly that way. His voice dropped lower. After she died, I went through some of her things and found journals she'd kept during the worst years, when we were drowning in medical debt and she was working herself to death. She wrote about the guilt of not being able to give me a normal childhood, the shame of accepting charity, the constant fear that one more crisis would break us completely. Reading those entries destroyed me because I never knew. She never let me see the weight she was carrying. Jennifer felt her throat tighten with emotion. She was protecting you. That's what parents do. I know, but she shouldn't have had to carry it alone. And when I saw you at that gala, sitting at that terrible table while people whispered, I thought about all the times my mother must have endured similar treatment. I realized I had the power to change the narrative. At least for one person. So I did. The raw honesty of his admission left Jennifer momentarily speechless. This wasn't the calculated philanthropy of someone building a public image. This was personal, almost desperately so. I understand survivor's guilt, she said quietly. After Sophie's first surgery, when we got the bill, I spent weeks wishing I'd been the one born with the heart defect, instead of her. It felt unbearable that she had to suffer for something outside anyone's control. Alexander's eyes met hers with startling intensity. But you got through it. You found a way. I didn't have a choice. When you're a parent, you just keep moving forward, because stopping means failing your child. That's exactly what my mother used to say. He smiled sadly. You would have liked each other. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The noise of the coffee shop, hissing espresso machines and low conversations, creating a cocoon of privacy around their table. Jennifer found herself studying Alexander's face, noticing details she'd missed at the gala. The faint scar above his left eyebrow, barely visible unless you looked closely. The way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled, the sense that beneath the commanding presence was someone fundamentally lonely. Can I ask you something now? Alexander broke the silence. What do you want? Not what you need for survival, but what you actually want for your life if resources weren't a constraint? The question caught Jennifer off guard. She'd spent so many years in survival mode that desires beyond basic stability had become abstract, almost frivolous. I don't know, she admitted. I used to want to be a social worker, to help families navigate systems that aren't designed for people like us, but that feels like someone else's dream now. Why? Because I'm not that person anymore. 7 years of constant crisis changes you. I'm harder now, more cynical, less idealistic. Alexander leaned forward. Or maybe you're more equipped now. You've lived the systems you wanted to help people navigate. That's not cynicism. That's expertise born from experience. The reframe was so simple, yet it shifted something in Jennifer's perspective. I hadn't thought about it that way. Caroline mentioned you were interested in completing your degree. The Future Fund can support that if it's something you want to pursue. It feels selfish, Jennifer confessed, taking time and resources for my education when Sophie needs so much. Sophie needs a mother who's fulfilled and thriving, not just surviving. That's not selfish. That's foundational. He paused, then added, My mother never went back to school. She talked about it sometimes, wistfully, but she always put it off for my sake. After she died, I found college brochures hidden in her desk drawer, dated from years earlier. She never even applied. That's one of my greatest regrets, that I didn't push her to prioritize herself. The pain in his voice was palpable. Jennifer reached across the table instinctively, placing her hand over his. She made choices based on love. You can't regret that, even if you wish things had been different. Alexander looked down at her hand covering his, and something shifted in the air between them. When his eyes met hers again, there was vulnerability there, but also something warmer, something that made Jennifer's pulse quicken. You have to pick up Sophie, he said quietly, not moving his hand away. Yes. But Jennifer didn't immediately stand. Alexander, this feels complicated. It doesn't have to be. His thumb moved slightly, a gentle caress against her fingers. I'm not looking to complicate your life, Jennifer. I don't know. I enjoy talking to you. You don't treat me like a balance sheet or a business opportunity. I don't know how to treat you, she admitted. You're my benefactor, essentially. There's a power imbalance that makes any kind of personal relationship problematic. He withdrew his hand, nodding slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. I didn't say I was uncomfortable, Jennifer clarified, surprising herself with the admission. I said it was complicated. Those are different things. Alexander's expression brightened slightly. So, what do we do with complicated? I don't know yet. But maybe we could, I don't know, figure it out slowly? Without pressure or expectations? I can do slow, he said, his smile genuine now, though fair warning, I'm not actually very good at it. I built a company by moving fast and taking calculated risks. Personal relationships are much scarier territory. Jennifer laughed, the tension breaking. Welcome to my world. Every day is scary territory when you're responsible for a small human. They stood, gathering their things, and Alexander walked her to the entrance. On the sidewalk, with afternoon sun casting long shadows, he hesitated. Would it be okay if I texted you sometimes? Not about the fund or business, just to talk? Jennifer knew she should establish boundaries, maintain professional distance, protect herself and Sophie from potential complications. But standing there, looking at this complicated, lonely, surprisingly genuine man, she found herself nodding. Yes. I'd like that. His smile was worth the risk as Jennifer hurried to the subway, conscious of the time and Sophie's impending school dismissal. She felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, yes, but also something more dangerous. Interest. Attraction. The beginning of feelings that could either heal or hurt, depending on how carefully they navigated the complicated terrain ahead. What she didn't know yet was that Alexander Hawthorne came with complications beyond the inherent power imbalance. Complications that would test everything she thought she understood about trust, vulnerability, and the price of accepting help from someone with the power to change your life. But for now, in this moment, it felt like the beginning of something worth exploring. Over the next 6 weeks, Jennifer's life transformed in ways both profound and subtle. The most immediate change was financial breathing room. Without the crushing pressure of medical debt and multiple jobs, she found herself experiencing something foreign. Time. Time to actually read Sophie bedtime stories without falling asleep mid-sentence. Time to cook real meals instead of relying on convenience food. Time to simply be present. Sophie thrived under the reduced stress. Her grades improved. Her anxiety about medical appointments decreased, and she began talking about future possibilities with the casual confidence of a child who believed the world held good things for her. Jennifer enrolled in online courses through New's social work program, studying in the evenings while Sophie did homework beside her. Both of them bent over laptops in companionable focus, but the most unexpected development was her growing friendship with Alexander. True to his word, he texted periodically, simple messages about articles he'd read or questions about Sophie's latest accomplishments. The conversations remained surface level at first, carefully navigating the boundaries they'd discussed. Then, gradually, they deepened. Alexander shared frustrations about board meetings where wealthy executives debated charitable giving with the detachment of people who'd never experienced need. Jennifer described the surreal experience of her former cleaning clients encountering her at a future fund benefit event, the awkward recalibration of relationships across class lines. They discovered shared interests. Both loved old movies, particularly film noir with its moral complexity and atmospheric shadows. Both had complicated relationships with the concept of ambition, Alexander driven by his mother's sacrifice, Jennifer by the desire to give Sophie opportunities she'd never had. And both, they gradually realized, were fundamentally lonely despite being surrounded by people. I have a proposition, Alexander texted one Thursday evening in November. And I want to be clear, this is entirely optional. No pressure. Jennifer's stomach fluttered with anticipation and anxiety. I'm listening. Hawthorne Technologies is hosting a company holiday party in 2 weeks. It's a family event. Employees bring their kids. Very casual. I was wondering if you and Sophie might want to come as my guests. She stared at the message, parsing the invitation's layers. A company event was semi-public, less pressure than a private dinner, but still significant. Being identified as his guest would signal something to his employees, though what exactly remained unclear. "Can I think about it?" she typed. "Of course. No rush. And genuinely no pressure. I just thought Sophie might enjoy it, and selfishly I'd like to spend time with both of you outside of coffee shops and hospital lobbies." The admission of wanting to spend time with her sent warmth through Jennifer's chest. Over the past weeks, she'd developed feelings for Alexander that went beyond gratitude, feelings she'd been carefully not examining too closely. He was kind, yes, but also funny in a dry, understated way. He listened with genuine attention, asking follow-up questions that showed he remembered details from previous conversations, and there were moments when their eyes met, when his hand brushed hers accidentally, that made her pulse race with possibility. But the power imbalance remained. He was a billionaire funding her daughter's medical care and her education. How could any relationship that developed under those circumstances be truly equal? "I need to be honest about something," she texted back. "I'm interested in spending time with you, more than I probably should be given the circumstances. But I'm terrified of the complications. What happens if we pursue this and it doesn't work out? Does that jeopardize Sophie's support? Do I lose the educational opportunities? The stakes feel impossibly high." His response came after a long pause, longer than his usual immediate replies. "Those are valid concerns, and I'm glad you're voicing them. Here's what I can tell you with absolute certainty. Sophie's medical support and your educational funding are legally protected through a structure that has nothing to do with my personal relationship with you. Even if we had a catastrophic falling out, those commitments wouldn't change. Caroline can verify this if you need independent confirmation. As for the complications, I can't eliminate them. The power dynamic is real, and I'm conscious of it constantly. But I also think we're both adults capable of navigating complexity if we're honest with each other. What I'm asking for is the chance to explore this, slowly, with clear communication and mutual respect. If at any point you want to stop, we stop. No consequences beyond potentially missing out on something that could be meaningful." Jennifer read the message 3 times, searching for hidden manipulation or unrealistic promises, and found neither. Just honest acknowledgement of the situation's difficulty and a genuine invitation to try. "Okay," she typed. "We'll come to the party. But Alexander, we need to be careful. For Sophie's sake most of all. She's already attached to you. Talks about you constantly. If this goes wrong, she'll be hurt too. I know. And I promise I won't be careless with either of you. You're both too important." Jennifer set down her phone, heart racing. She'd just crossed a line, acknowledging feelings and accepting an invitation that moved them from benefactor and recipient into something personal. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The Hawthorne Technologies holiday party was held in the company's downtown headquarters, a soaring glass building that occupied an entire block. Jennifer and Sophie arrived to find the lobby transformed into a winter wonderland, complete with ice sculptures, a massive Christmas tree, and stations for cookie decorating, ornament making, and photos with Santa. Sophie's eyes went wide with wonder. "Mom, this is amazing." Alexander appeared almost immediately, as if he'd been watching for their arrival. He was dressed casually in jeans and a soft gray sweater, more relaxed than Jennifer had ever seen him. "You made it. Sophie, I'm so glad you're here. Have you ever decorated a gingerbread house?" Sophie shook her head, suddenly shy despite her earlier enthusiasm. Alexander knelt to her level. "Well, that's unacceptable. Come on, I happen to know where they're keeping the best candy decorations." As he led Sophie toward the activity stations, Jennifer followed, watching the easy way he engaged with her daughter, asking questions and making silly jokes that brought out Sophie's giggles. Other employees approached throughout the evening, greeting Alexander with respect, but also warmth, and he introduced Jennifer simply as my friend Jennifer and her daughter Sophie, without elaboration or pretense. She met software engineers and marketing directors, administrative assistants and executives, all mingling in the democratic chaos of a family party. What struck Jennifer most was the culture Alexander had built. This wasn't the cutthroat tech environment she'd imagined. People seemed genuinely happy, engaged in conversations that suggested real camaraderie. "He's a good boss," commented a woman named Maria, one of the senior developers, as they watched Alexander help Sophie apply frosting to a gingerbread house. "Fair, demanding in the right ways. But he actually cares about us as people, not just productivity units. My son had cancer 2 years ago, and Alexander restructured my entire role so I could work remotely during treatment. Never made me feel like I was a burden or a charity case, just did what needed to be done." Jennifer felt a lump in her throat. "That sounds like him. Are you two together?" Maria asked with friendly curiosity. "I've never seen him bring anyone to company events, and the way he looks at you, well, it's pretty obvious." "It's complicated," Jennifer said, the stock phrase feeling inadequate. Maria laughed. "The good things usually are." As the evening progressed, Jennifer found herself relaxing, allowing the festive atmosphere and Sophie's joy to override her anxieties. When Alexander suggested they take a break from the chaos and see the view from the executive floor, she agreed. The elevator ride to the top floor was quiet, Sophie dozing against Jennifer's leg after hours of sugar-fueled excitement. The executive lounge was empty, the party contained to the lower floors, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan at night, a glittering landscape of light and possibility. "Thank you for coming tonight," Alexander said quietly, standing beside her at the window. "It means a lot to me. Thank you for inviting us." Sophie had an incredible time. "And you?" He turned to face her directly. "Did you have a good time?" Jennifer met his eyes, seeing vulnerability there, genuine uncertainty about her feelings. "Yes, I did. More than I expected, actually. Your employees clearly respect and care about you. It says a lot about who you are. I try to build the kind of company I wish had existed when my mother was struggling, where people are valued beyond their productivity, where life circumstances don't derail careers." He hesitated, then continued. "Jennifer, I know this is complicated, and I know the power dynamics are real. But I need you to know that what I feel for you, it's not about charity or obligation. It's about the fact that you make me laugh, that you challenge me, that you've built something extraordinary with Sophie despite every obstacle. You're remarkable, and I'd like the chance to explore where this goes if you're willing." Jennifer's heart hammered in her chest. This was the moment, the decision point that would determine whether they moved forward or maintained careful distance. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of getting hurt. Of Sophie getting hurt. Of losing the stability we've just found." "I'm scared too," Alexander said simply. "I haven't let anyone close in years. Not since my mother died. It's easier to keep people at arm's length, to be the benefactor or the boss but never the vulnerable person underneath. You make me want to try anyway." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The simple gesture felt impossibly intimate. "Can I kiss you?" Jennifer's breath caught. She glanced down at Sophie, still dozing peacefully in a nearby chair, then back at Alexander's face, open and hopeful. "Yes," she whispered. The kiss was soft, tentative. A question more than a declaration. His lips were warm, and he tasted faintly of the peppermint hot chocolate he'd been drinking earlier. When they pulled apart, Jennifer felt tears on her cheeks, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Relief, maybe, or the overwhelming sense of allowing herself something she'd forbidden for so long. "Okay?" Alexander asked softly, his forehead resting against hers. "Okay," Jennifer confirmed, smiling through tears. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms while the city glittered below and Sophie slept nearby. And for the first time in 7 years, Jennifer allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, She deserved this. Someone who saw her not as a project or obligation, but as a person worthy of love. What she didn't know yet was that Alexander's past held secrets that would soon surface, secrets that would test everything they'd begun to build and force both of them to decide what they were willing to risk for a chance at real connection. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that felt like enough. The next 6 weeks felt like learning to breathe in a new atmosphere. Jennifer and Alexander navigated their developing relationship with the careful attention of people conscious of the stakes. They moved slowly, dating in the traditional sense, dinners after Sophie's bedtime, weekend museum visits where they could talk uninterrupted, and occasional phone calls that stretched into early morning hours as they discovered each other's histories and hopes. Sophie, predictably, was thrilled by the development. "Is Alexander your boyfriend now?" she asked one morning while Jennifer braided her hair for school. Jennifer paused, considering how to answer. "He's someone very special to me. And to you. We're figuring out what that means together. I hope it means we can keep him," Sophie said with the blunt honesty of childhood. "He's the nicest grown-up I know. Except you." The simple statement made Jennifer's eyes sting with tears. Sophie had never known her father, never had a consistent male presence in her life. Watching her daughter trust Alexander with such open-hearted affection was both beautiful and terrifying. By mid-December, Jennifer had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable for the first time in years. She'd left her paralegal job after securing a position at a non-profit organization that supported families navigating medical crises, work that aligned with her values and utilized her hard-won expertise. Her online courses were progressing well, and she was on track to complete her degree by the following year. Everything, impossibly, was working out. Then, on a cold Tuesday evening, Caroline Chen called with urgency in her voice. "Jennifer, I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. There's a situation we need to discuss regarding the future fund." Jennifer's stomach dropped. "Is it Sophie's care? Is something wrong?" "Sophie's care is fine, fully secure. This is about something else, something I can't discuss over the phone. Can you be here at 9? After a sleepless night, Jennifer arrived at Caroline's office to find her normally composed demeanor replaced with visible tension. "Thank you for coming. I'm going to be direct because you deserve clarity. We've received a legal challenge to the future fund's structure. Someone is claiming that the fund was created under false pretenses and that Alexander has been using charitable vehicles for personal purposes." Jennifer felt the floor tilt beneath her. "What does that mean? Who's making these claims?" "A former business partner of Alexander's, a man named Richard Castellan. He's arguing that the future fund isn't a legitimate charitable endeavor, but rather a mechanism for Alexander to cultivate personal relationships under the guise of philanthropy. Specifically, he's suggesting that Alexander's relationship with you is inappropriate and that he leveraged the fund to pursue a romantic connection." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Everything Jennifer had feared, every anxiety about power dynamics and ulterior motives, was now being voiced publicly by someone challenging the very foundation of the support that had transformed her and Sophie's life. "Is that true?" Jennifer's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Did Alexander create the fund just to get close to me?" Caroline leaned forward, her expression earnest. "No. Absolutely not. The future fund was in development for over a year before the gala where you met Alexander. I was involved in the planning from the beginning. Richard Castellan is making these accusations as part of a larger business dispute with Alexander. He's trying to damage Alexander's reputation and undermine his philanthropic work. But Alexander did pursue a relationship with me after establishing the fund. That doesn't look good. I won't pretend the optics aren't complicated," Caroline admitted. "But I've watched Alexander operate for years. He doesn't do anything with hidden agendas. If he developed feelings for you, it's because of who you are, not because of some manipulative plan." Jennifer's mind raced, analyzing every interaction with Alexander through this new lens of suspicion. Had she been naive? Had she let her attraction and gratitude cloud her judgment? What happens now? Legally, the fund is on solid ground. The challenge won't hold up. But there will be media attention, scrutiny of Alexander's relationships and decisions, and by extension, scrutiny of you. Caroline's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry. This is exactly the kind of complication we hope to avoid. Jennifer left the meeting feeling hollowed out. By the time she reached home, the story had already hit local news, and gossip sites ran speculative headlines about Alexander Hawthorne's suspicious charitable fund and his relationship with an unnamed single-mother recipient. She had just settled Sophie with dinner and cartoons, trying to maintain normalcy, when Alexander called. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. I just heard about Richard's filing. This is completely baseless, a vindictive move by someone I rejected in a business merger. Is it baseless? Jennifer asked, her voice harder than she'd intended. Did you create the fund thinking about me specifically? What? No. Jennifer, I swear to you, the fund was already in development when we met. You have to believe me. I want to. But Alexander, this is exactly what I was afraid of. Now there's public speculation, and Sophie might hear things at school, and everything feels tainted. She could hear the pain in her own voice. I need some time to think, to figure out what's real, and what I've been telling myself, because I wanted it to be true. Jennifer, please don't shut me out. We can get through this together. I'll call you tomorrow. She ended the call before he could respond, then sat in her quiet kitchen and tried not to fall apart. The next week was brutal. The story gained traction in tabloids and business publications, with varying degrees of accuracy and speculation. Jennifer found herself the subject of invasive interest, reporters calling her phone and showing up at her apartment. Sophie's school had to implement additional security measures after a photographer tried to take pictures during pickup. Through it all, Alexander maintained respectful distance, honoring Jennifer's request for space while his legal team systematically dismantled Richard Castellan's claims. Caroline kept Jennifer updated on the proceedings, and the evidence clearly showed the fund's legitimate development timeline, but the damage to Jennifer's sense of security and trust felt irreparable. Then, Sophie came home from school crying, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. Madison's mom said you're a gold digger who tricks rich people. What's a gold digger, Mommy? Why is she saying mean things about you? Jennifer gathered her daughter close, rage and heartbreak warring in her chest. This was precisely what she'd feared, that her relationship with Alexander would make Sophie a target, that their tenuous stability would crumble under the weight of public judgment. That night, after Sophie finally fell asleep, Jennifer made a decision. She called Alexander. I can't do this. I'm sorry, but I can't put Sophie through the scrutiny and judgment. It's not fair to her. Jennifer, please, let me explain everything. Let me show you the documentation proving the timeline, proving that Richard is lying. It doesn't matter whether he's lying or not. The damage is done. People are making assumptions, and Sophie is suffering because of my choices. I need to protect her, even if that means stepping back from us. You're protecting her by teaching her to run from complications? Or are you protecting yourself by finding an excuse to not trust what we have? The accusation stung because it held truth. Maybe both. But that's my right, isn't it? To decide what risks I'm willing to take with my daughter's well-being? Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Yes, it's absolutely your right. I'm sorry. I never wanted this for either of you. I thought what we had was worth fighting for. So did I. Jennifer whispered. But I don't know anymore. I'm sorry, Alexander. She ended the call and allowed herself to cry, grieving the loss of something that had felt like the beginning of real happiness. Over the following days, the legal challenge collapsed under scrutiny. Richard Castellan's claims revealed as part of a bitter business dispute unrelated to the fund's actual purpose or operations. Several major publications ran corrections and apologies. The future fund was vindicated, its structure and intentions confirmed as legitimate. But for Jennifer, the victory felt hollow. She'd ended things with Alexander, drawn a clear boundary that protected her and Sophie from further speculation. Yet the absence of him in her daily life felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. Sophie asked about him constantly, confusion and sadness in her voice. Did Alexander do something bad? Is that why we don't see him anymore? No, sweetheart. He didn't do anything bad. Sometimes grown-up relationships are complicated, and people need to take breaks to figure things out. That's silly, Sophie declared with childish certainty. If you like someone and they're nice to you, you should keep them. If only it were that simple, Jennifer thought. 2 weeks before Christmas, Jennifer received a package at her apartment. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a letter in unfamiliar handwriting. The return address indicated it was from someone named Margaret Hayes, Alexander's mother. Jennifer opened the letter with trembling hands. Dear Jennifer, if you're reading this, it means my son has finally trusted someone enough to share this journal with them. I wrote these entries during the hardest years of our lives, when Alexander was recovering from his accident and we were drowning in debt. I never intended anyone to read them, but after I'm gone, I hope they might help Alexander understand that the struggle was worth it, that he was always worth it. My son carries guilt he doesn't deserve, believes he's somehow responsible for my hardship. I hope someday he finds someone who helps him see himself as I did, as someone extraordinary who brought joy and meaning to every difficult day. If that someone is you, please be patient with his fears. He's learned to protect himself by keeping people at distance, but underneath is someone capable of profound love and loyalty. Alexander arranged for this journal to be delivered if certain circumstances arose, circumstances that would make you doubt his intentions or character. He wanted you to see the timeline documented in real time, to understand that his mother's suffering was never his fault, and that his determination to help others comes from genuine conviction, not manipulation. I don't know you, but if my son trusts you with this, you must be someone special. Please don't give up on him. Sincerely, Margaret Hayes. Jennifer opened the journal with tears already streaming down her face. The entries spanned years, detailing Margaret's struggles and hopes, her fears and small victories. But what struck Jennifer most were the recurring themes: gratitude for Alexander's resilience, determination to shield him from the full extent of their financial crisis, and unwavering belief that his potential was limitless. There were entries from the period when Alexander was building his first company, Margaret's pride and anxiety as he took risks and worked impossible hours, and near the end, entries about establishing charitable foundations, Margaret's encouragement that Alexander use his success to help families like theirs had been. The final entry was dated 3 months before Margaret's death. Alexander told me today about his plans for a comprehensive support fund for families facing medical crises. He wants it to cover everything we lacked, not just medical bills, but the stability needed to actually heal and build futures. He's been working on this for over a year, researching models and consulting experts. I'm so proud I could burst. This is who he was always meant to be, someone who transforms suffering into meaningful change. I hope I live long enough to see the first family helped by this fund. But even if I don't, I know Alexander will make it happen. He always keeps his promises. Jennifer closed the journal, Margaret's words settling into her chest like truth, finally recognized. The future fund hadn't been created for her specifically. It had been created because of Margaret's suffering and Alexander's determination to honor her memory by preventing others from facing the same impossible choices. Meeting Jennifer at the gala, witnessing her situation, had simply provided a face and story to what had already been Alexander's mission. She'd been wrong, not about the complications or the valid concerns about power dynamics, but about his fundamental intentions. Alexander Hawthorne wasn't manipulating her through charity. He was simply being exactly who his mother had raised him to be. Jennifer picked up her phone and called him. He answered on the first ring. Jennifer, I read your mother's journal. I'm sorry I doubted you. You had every right to be cautious, to protect yourself and Sophie. I should have shown you the documentation earlier, been more transparent about the fund's history. I was scared, Jennifer admitted, of trusting something that felt too good to be true, of repeating patterns where I give someone power over me and end up hurt. I understand that. And I don't want power over you, Jennifer. I want partnership. Equal footing despite the financial disparity. I know that's complicated to achieve, but I'd like to try if you're willing. Jennifer looked around her small apartment, at the life she'd built through sheer determination, and realized something important. She'd survived alone because she had to. But surviving wasn't the same as thriving, and maybe thriving meant accepting help, accepting love, accepting that vulnerability was a strength rather than a weakness. Yes, she said. I'm willing to try. Really? The hope in his voice was almost painful. Really? But Alexander, we need to figure out how to navigate this in a way that maintains my agency and protects Sophie. Clear boundaries, honest communication, and the understanding that I'm not a project to be fixed. You were never a project. You're the person who makes me want to be better, who reminds me why the work matters. You and Sophie both. Come over, Jennifer said impulsively. Sophie's been asking about you constantly. Let's talk, the three of us, and figure out what comes next. An hour later, Alexander arrived with Chinese takeout and a nervous expression that made him look younger. Sophie's face lit up when she saw him. You came back. Mom said grown-up relationships are complicated, but I told her that's silly if you like someone. Alexander laughed, kneeling to Sophie's level. Your mom was right that it's complicated, but you were also right that it's worth working through complications when you care about someone. I care about both of you very much. They ate dinner together, conversation flowing easily as the weeks of tension dissolved. After Sophie went to bed, Jennifer and Alexander sat on her small couch, his arm around her shoulders, and talked honestly about fears, boundaries, and hopes. I can't promise this will be easy, Jennifer said. I have trust issues and control issues and probably a dozen other issues that will surface as we navigate this. I have issues too, Alexander assured her. Workaholism, guilt complexes, and a tendency to try to solve problems by throwing money at them instead of actually dealing with emotional complexity. We're a mess, Jennifer said, smiling. A complete disaster, Alexander agreed, kissing her forehead. But maybe we can be a mess together. Outside, snow began to fall, covering Brooklyn in clean white silence. And inside her small apartment, Jennifer Morrison allowed herself to believe in something she'd thought was lost forever. The possibility of building a life that wasn't just about survival, but about genuine joy. The complications didn't disappear. They would continue to navigate questions about power dynamics, public scrutiny, and the challenges of blending their vastly different worlds. But they would do it together, with honesty and patience, and the determination to build something real. Because sometimes, fairy tales don't happen despite complications. They happen because two people decide the complications are worth facing together. And that, Jennifer realized, was the best kind of magic, the kind you choose, the kind you build with your own hands, the kind that lasts. The end. Before you go, please rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments below, and let us know what resonated with you. Thank you for watching.